Good morning and welcome to another football transfer forum. Tony, slick as ever at the start there for us. It's a Hollywood production, absolutely. Welcome to everybody on the call this morning. Yet another fantastic lineup of guests, and I'm really excited about some of the content this morning as well. I'm Ryan Mcknight, joined as always by Football Transfer Forum founder Tony Sharkey. Tony, good morning. How are you?
I'm great, thanks, Ryan. I'm learning about this new technology that we're using, and by the end of this year, I think, or by the end of lockdown, I think I might have got it cracked just when we go back to live events. But yeah, I'm really good, thanks. I'm really looking forward to today. It's great to have Guy and Michael and Kristjaan and Daniele as well on. So I'm looking for a really good show. I'm calling it a show, not a webinar. It's a show.
Well, yeah, it shows one word for it, definitely. Tony, whilst you allow me to share my screen, I'm going to introduce the other guys onto the call this morning. As always, we're joined by Leicester City loan manager Guy Branston. Guy, how are you? Just gonna ask you to unmute yourself. There you go, brilliant. How are you?
Yeah, really good, thanks, as normal. Just been ticking along, getting my head down, working hard. Doing a lot of remote games at the minute, so my eyes are burning. But other than that, I'm finally getting out a bit more. It's starting to increase, so it's nice to be seeing the doors opening, if you want to use that.
Absolutely, excellent. Well, great to have you with us again. We've got three fantastic guests this morning for you. I'm going to introduce first of all Michael Caulfield, sports psychologist. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm okay. We were just saying off air. I need some in-depth knowledge off you about why it is that I take such great pleasure out of seeing Tony struggle with technology. It's the highlight of my day at the moment.
It's too early to swear, but you're just obviously one of those, aren't you? You're just complete and utter one of those, aren't you? You're reveling in your mate's pain.
Absolutely, but we're really looking forward to hearing from you and some of the work that you're doing with professional clubs a little bit later on. We're also joined really special guests today, Daniele Canepa from Mission 89. Daniele, good morning. Hello from Italy. How are you?
Hello everyone. I'm fine, thanks. And you?
Yeah, we're all really well, thank you.
Ryan, if you need me to step in with me Italian, just let me know, and I'll interpret for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Don't hold your breath, Tony. But I'll take that opportunity if it arises. Daniel, look forward to learning a little bit more about Mission 89, and as we'll speak about, we've got a separate webinar with you guys in a few weeks' time as well. But first of all, I'm going to introduce formally our first guest of the morning, and it's the new sporting director at Sunderland, Kristjaan Speman. Kristjaan, good morning.
Good morning, guys.
How are you?
Yeah, really good, thank you. Really good.
Now, Tony is massive on his backgrounds.
I
You know,
love the
Tony has recently invested in some new wallpaper, as everyone can see this month. So I can see, even though you've not been there, like the office is all set up, you've got the background sorted. That looks tremendous.
Kristjaan,
I'd like to take credit for the office, but it's just the director's meeting room at the office next to the stadium that I've at the minute. So
Good.
Mine would look a lot worse, and it's in a redecoration stage at the minute.
Fantastic, excellent. Well, you know, we're going to crack on because there's so much to get through with yourself and the other guest this morning. Just as a bit of housekeeping for everybody else that's tuning in, if you've got a question for any of the panelists this morning, please try and get it in the Q&A box rather than the chat. It just makes my life much easier when we try and get through the questions a little bit later on. So, Kristjaan, I've got to say, first of all, welcome to the Football Transfer and thanks for your time this morning. You've obviously not been at the club that long, and obviously it's a club that everybody working in the game knows has had a really sort of tough sort of 5-6 years. How have you found moving up to the Northeast, and how have you found that your first moments at the football club?
Well, the move up and the transitions, I think, always a difficult one. Certainly, probably more so family than professional. I think, like you said, many of the guys on the call today, you're on the road and you're traveling around quite a bit, so I don't think there's too much difference there. I've been really fortunate to have quite a lot of stability in my professional life, obviously over the last 10-13 years, working at one club with several different roles. But I'll have to say that, first of all, I think that the football club, in terms of its welcome, the people of the region who are obviously desperate for the club to do well, have been really welcoming. So from that perspective, it's been a really nice change. Like I said, I think once I've relocated permanently and it feels like home, then obviously I think that'll probably give me the platform to hopefully do some better work, in the club and in the environment, in the community.
Now, Tony and I we've completed the full set of cafe and bars in the Northeast. So when you are up here permanently, like, we are the guys to come to in terms of meeting spots during the day or night. Now, I just wanted to touch on briefly. I know we'd had a sort of prep meeting yesterday. I wanted to touch about how the move actually came about, because in a previous football transfer forum, we'd had the guys from Nolan Partners on. And my understanding is that you were recruited by a recruiter.
Yeah, well, the football club was obviously in the embryonic stages of going through a takeover, and I think there was obviously a lot of conversations that went on between our new owner now and the previous owners that are obviously still involved at boardroom shareholder level around what they wanted the club to look like, and they embarked on a search to try to find a sporting director position for the club. I suppose technically under the new era, but I think the more that they got into it and the more discussion that occurred amongst those key stakeholders, Stuart Donald was really keen to get that position in situ, almost regardless of if the takeover went through. So they ran the process through a recruitment agency. I was contacted by a recruitment agency whether I'd be interested in entertaining the job and taking some conversations. I'm sure, the recruitment agency had conversations with some other people in the game. I think there's a lot of skilled people out there that could do this type of job. So I think I was really fortunate, I suppose, in that process to come out on top. I think it's a unique role that they're after here, which probably helped aligned it closer to maybe my CV and experiences than maybe, another club might have gone in a slightly different direction, and I might have been a little bit further away from the ideal candidate.
Yeah, Tony, we've been talking for a number of years really about how, if there was ever a club that needed a sporting director's role to really provide some stability into it, it's been Sunderland, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think so, certainly. I mean, there's always the danger, I think, when you're outside the organisation, you're making assumptions and drawing conclusions on what goes on and how it goes on. I think you can't help but do that, because obviously in our industry, there's so much out there that's in the press. So you feel like you get an insight into something. I very much wanted to sort of hold my counsel until I got here to be able to understand what the issues were and how they could potentially be solved. But I think some of the general principles we hear about around, structure, strategy, vision, continuity, those types of principles, I think, they'd probably be most people would probably suggest that they were things that were probably missing out the jigsaw, which obviously would lend itself to that type of position.
And Kristjaan, is it a big rebuilding job then, as you see it?
Yeah, I think the difficult thing when you come into a club, especially I suppose under a new owner, is there's obviously a lot of impetus around doing new things. And I think the danger with that as well is that you can steamroller all the good things that happen. So my view on it is it's like a renovation project on a listed building. You know, I think
yeah, listed. Is it grade 1 listed or grade 2 listed? I'm not sure.
I'll leave that up to everyone on the call to make a decision. But I think the principle around, you know, what we would like this to be in the future is obviously be it the modern cutting edge of data, evidence-based decision-making technology, but you should still be able to find the essence of Sunderland. And there'll be lots of there are, and I'm uncovering every single day things that we can do better and things that you go, wow, that's really, really good. And maybe because of the negative connotation that's come around through some of the communication externally, you think that wouldn't be happening here. So I think you've got to be careful to try to restore and retain that type of, whether it's process, whether it's behaviours, some elements of the culture, just like you go into one of your grand designs programs and you'd see an old building and it'd be modern and flash and brilliant, but then there'd be a lovely old fireplace there, wouldn't there? Or there'd be some essence of what it was like.
Yeah.
Kirill, our new chairman, he's absolutely been pushing forward this piece around that, whilst we hope to be here for a long-term appointment, we're still going to be only a very, very small part of the Sunderland history. And it's really, really important to sort of uphold and be the custodians for that sort of culture and legacy.
I think you make a really good point there, Kristjaan, in terms of it's quite easy when new people come into the clubs, and whether in any position, whether it's manager, whether it's sporting director, whether it's chief exec, it's quite easy, isn't it, just to label everything as rubbish, as crap that's going on. And there's a bit of humility about saying, do you know what, actually that bit's okay, that bit's good. There's not a weakness in saying that, is there?
No, I don't think it's a weakness. I think it sometimes probably occurs you go other places that have performed really, really well, and you just because the outcome's been good, has the process and the organisation structure behind it, does that underpin ongoing success, or has there been a bit of fortune with a perfect storm? I think you have to align the strategy to the context of the situation. That's what we're trying to do in these early sort of weeks and months. Is yes, we want to do these things. What order you do them? What do you affect and what don't you affect? Where do you give the opportunity to the guys that are here to run with projects and show what they can do, rather than just saying, I'll tell you what we'll do, we'll bring in this person or that person. And having said that, people on the call probably will go, well, hang about, you've got loads of adverts out there. One of the things which I think the previous majority stakeholder, you want to say, in the organisation did was they had a lot of vacancies accrued over a period of time, but they sort of left them because they knew there was going to be a takeover.
Sure.
Yeah.
What they didn't want to do was recruit people into jobs, move people out of houses, and then it might not fit. So what the situation has created is a lot of opportunity to rejig some elements of the structure without, saying to people, look, unfortunately, there's not a position here for you. That will happen in some elements because you're going to have a natural transition and change. But I think, we want to be a people-centric organisation, so you've got to try to at all times behave in a people-centric way. Otherwise, people are going to call you out for it, quite rightly.
Guy, did you want to come in?
Yeah, hi, Val. Nice to meet you. Absolutely great that you're on. Thanks for coming. It's really, really important that we got you on, because it's been a big thing for Tony. He's got a tear in his eye that someone from Sunderland's on. He's been going on and on about it for ages with me, for obviously my connections with the club. And it's great to have you on and see where you're going with the vision. It sounds fantastic. My question would be, what are you going to bring really from Birmingham's excellent academy, which you've obviously helped create, to Sunderland? What are the main features you're going to bring into Sunderland Football Club? Because I think you have such a great academy there, working closely next to it at Leicester City. What can you add to an already great academy, in my opinion, as well as Sunderland? How can you improve that Cat 1? I know results haven't gone the way of some of the 23s, 18s, 16s, but when I've ever played against them, they've always absolutely battered us physically, and they've always turned up with their best. So it'd be great to see what you bring KPI-wise.
Well, I think first of all, the region's got a rich history for producing talented footballers. And I think we see an opportunity here to have a best-in-class academy program, which hopefully dominates the Northeast. And that's not being disrespectful to guys in the other big clubs in this area. But you've made a reference there to our sort of infrastructure in terms of like the stadium and the training ground, and we're just going through an investment plan on the training ground and the stadium at the minute. That's the meeting I was in this morning. That we should be able to deliver everybody's dreams and aspirations at this football club. I think the biggest, most single important factor, and probably the reason why I got the job maybe in front of some other excellent candidates, is that the owner is absolutely convinced about having a pathway through to the first team and playing young players and having an opportunity for young players. And Sunderland, while in its current predicament in League One, or if we were to be successful in the Championship, has an outcome for every single player in terms of being able to play in and around the first team. I think the first thing is around having a mindset to trust and play young players. For whatever reason, in the first half of the season, there weren't a lot of young players getting an opportunity. I think you've seen a dramatic change in terms of the number of young players in the squad, opportunity for some of the players that were around the fringe of the squad. And then behind that sort of positive aspiration for them to go and succeed in our team is having a really, really clear plan about what's happening the next level down. So obviously your role at Leicester, we've got Elliot Embleton, who here is seen as quite some hope in Elliot that can go on to be a real mainstay in the team. So we had to make the difficult decision. So we had a really, really clear process and plan about what we were doing with Elliot. We loaned him to Blackpool, and a lot of the fans in the area are like, "Oh, what are you doing? You've loaned Elliot to Blackpool." But we tried to come up with some metrics of what we felt Elliot's involvement with our first team would be, based on the fact that we're obviously trying to charge up the league and get an automatic promotion spot. And we felt that was the best option for him. So spending all the time and energy to get a pathway that's bespoke for every single player, I think is really, really important. What we're going to do different to Birmingham, that's difficult for me to say because it's so early, if you like, in terms of making that assessment on what's maybe we perceive as being good and what we perceive as needing improvement. But I think it's the nuances around making sure the players understand what they're doing, how they're doing it, and we're the custodians of their sort of learning journey and those outcomes and wherever those outcomes might be. I think that's really, really important. We were able at Birmingham to give every single kid an individual program. And I know a lot of people say that, but we had a dedicated way of making sure that every kid did what they needed to do at the right time. And that was our, if you like, unique selling point. So I certainly would like to see that be a central part of our strategy with our young players. But ultimately, I think every young player wants an opportunity. So we've got to create opportunity for kids.
Sure. So, Kristjaan, is that a bit of a commitment from the club to retain its Cat 1 status moving forward? And as a sort of second question off that, you've got deep experience in the EPPP system. How well do you feel the EPPP system is serving clubs and players to produce, first team players?
Well, your first question, I mean, the club's done wonders to retain Category 1 status through the period it's gone through. I mean, in your opening statement, you've talked about obviously the difficulty over the last 4 or 5 years. I think most football clubs would have scrapped Cat 1 and gone a different, based on where they're at. They've unfortunately had to sell some players, or where players have had an opportunity to go. You could argue that that's the academy doing its job for what Sunderland required, because it's obviously made a sizable revenue generation for the club over the last couple of years when they've been in a dark place. So you could say it's done its job there. Certainly, we have to change the aspirations over what doing its job means. For us, it has to be 50 appearances in the first team minimum. So from that perspective, it's not about being Cat 1. It's about this. We want Sunderland to be a high performance institute in the Northeast. So over the medium to long term, we're going to be moving through and beyond Cat 1 criteria, if you like, if you're going to use that as your sort of benchmark and your thresholds. And whether the EPPP system has done some wonderful things for the youth development in the game, and it's given people that didn't have a voice in a lot of areas and a lot of sort of performance domains. I was part of the working group that came and put together the new audit process with the Premier League, that what we're seeing now, and obviously there's been a big shift to the type of audit, who the audit company are, and all those types of things. I think in any industry, the industries propel and do well based on innovation and curiosity. And my only worry with an E333 framework is it produces a minimum standard rather than an aspirational standard. So that's why when people say your Cat 1 doesn't really, for me, doesn't really get me up in the morning. We're talking about high performance institute of the Northeast. Now I'm like, okay, right, I'm getting in half an hour early and I'm staying half an hour later for that project. That sounds like get my teeth into it. So I think it's just where you set your ambition. I understand at the start of the E333, you need to have some minimum standards, because look, we had some really, I'm going to say, awkward things happening across the landscape where you couldn't really say that was in the best interest of the kids or producing players. So I think it's done its job. I think it's like any type of framework, you have to evolve with the times and you have to adapt. Whether it can evolve and adapt quick enough, that's the question.
Yeah, Kristjaan, it sounds fantastic that Sunderland's going to try and be the best academy in the Northeast, and it's going to be bringing young kids through. Can you just expand on that, where you said 50 appearances? What did you mean by that, 50 appearances?
Well, I think if, let me put it this way, young players join the academy program not to be professional footballers or to have an ex-house or some of these materialistic things. They come because they want to go out in front of 48,000 people and that massive roar at a stadium alive. That's what they're doing. So for us, we want to keep that dream alive. That's the objective. All the other things are just things that'll happen and they'll run their course. But ultimately, we've got to try to get the players to understand they've got to get out and play 50 times. And it's a little bit of a round number and it's a little bit gimmicky, if you like. But I think it's about being a sustained player in the first team squad.
Right.
And,
right.
We don't want players to make one appearance. If we're being critical of my time at Birmingham, we ended up with quite a few players that, they got an opportunity in the team, which could be, were they good enough, were they not good enough? But we had a lot of players that only made one or two appearances. I think the job is to try to get sustained appearances in and around and be an asset to the football club, either as part of a playing squad, as part of the team, and then hopefully like a Jude that we had at Birmingham becomes a saleable asset and a real revenue generator.
Guy?
Just going on to the 50 appearances, I think where you're probably propelling Sunderland, and I see the same problems here at Leicester, it's a difficult thing to become a professional footballer. So I think what Tony was maybe mentioning, to actually play 50 times for Sunderland Football Club, a huge honour in someone's career anyway. But to actually play 50 times, he becomes an established player over a period of time. And that's a real difficulty for any kid off the street of Sunderland to go and do. So to have that high-end, I suppose, star to aim for is great. I'm a big believer in that. But we have the realism of football as well, and the difficulty of making a professional scene. And just getting to the professional contract scene is never been easier, in my opinion, as an ex-player. But to go and produce a player with 50 games just sounds like a massive thing to go and aim for. And I think it's the only way to do it, if I'm honest. I think it's the only way to do it, Tony. I think you've got to have massive goals. And if you fall below them and get 30 games, he's done unbelievable for himself and his family. And the way they're going in the future, that could be 30 games in the Premier League, which then you end up selling into the Championship at 10 million.
But as you go up, Guy, obviously League One, it's, to make 50 appearances in League One, you've done brilliantly. To make 50 appearances in the Championship.
Go on, I did it. Go on, say it again.
You've done absolutely fantastic.
Yes!
And then if you make 50 appearances in the best league in the world, that is unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah.
You get one appearance in the Premier League.
But it's an academy that's turning over League One, League Two players at the minute, and then all of a sudden it starts turning over Championship players.
Yeah.
The movement from, say, League £1 million player to £10 million player basic when they get in the Championship at 50 games under the belt is huge jump. And that's where they need to be, the Sunderland Football Club. So to aim high is the only way to go with this.
Absolutely, I totally concur. Kristjaan, we've spoke before on this forum about how there's no room for development in the first team. The day you make your debut, how can it be an extension of your development? Points are on the line, managers' jobs are on the line, your job's on the line, everybody's jobs are on the line. How is it that you're framing that in terms of wanting to get more players into the first team? By virtue of that, how do you complete their development prior to that, so they are ready to go and meet the expectations of like you said, what can be some fairly fickle fans up here in the Northeast?
Yeah, no, I get that. I mean, there's always a phrase goes around, isn't there, for sort of head coaches and managers, which is pick your owner.
Yeah.
And I think that's the same in this situation, is that when I was going to move from Birmingham and I had a great job and I had a great breadth of responsibilities and influence, is what was my next move going to be? And the reason I came to Sunderland was, one was the size of the club, the size of the challenge, but the most important thing was the potential of working under a new chairman, a new owner. And it's probably quite a unique one, because obviously our owner's fairly young in age. He's a very astute businessman. He understands the football landscape. But ultimately as well, what he's really, really keen to do is to deliver for the people of Sunderland, rather than maybe deliver for shareholders or deliver for a financial return. So what that does is it creates a situation at the top of the organisation where you've got somebody who actually really, really wants to see young players play in the team. Now, not at the expense or the cost of promotion or different things, but maybe there's more flexibility there for these young kids at Sunderland, where the sporting director's got more scope to work with young players, and the head coach has got more scope, because all of a sudden the conversation is around, well, come on, let's play this young one rather than this player or that player who's going out of contract or hasn't performed well. There's less pressure, so therefore there's more opportunity to make some more decisions around helping young players. But ultimately it goes back to it goes back to the question that Guy asked earlier, is all the things that happen around the first team, you can develop the players. I see our head coach working with 2 of our 18-year-old players on some fine detail in and around the practice session. It's through good coaching and through good organisation. It's doing 100 things really, really well, rather than maybe doing one thing, which is playing him in the team.
Yeah, Guy, I know you're keen to ask another question. I'm going to ask you a question as well, Guy. We've spoke about it in the past in terms of, whilst I think we're all on agreement on this, in terms of that aspiration is absolutely the way to go. You still have to get results, don't you? You still have to get results, and that has to be sort of underpinned by a maintaining of expectations, unless you shift the expectations. What are your thoughts?
Well, the big thing for me is, I think an academy of that size will always produce despite.
Yep.
They'll produce. They're a massive academy with a massive catchment area, and they've got a great opportunity of dobbing into Scotland and across. I think they'll produce the despite. But the big thing for me is, it's not just producing despite. I think that if you're sitting there and having conversations with your staff too long about players, then they're simply not good enough to get in the first team. I think you'll see the quality, you'll see the content that's there in front of you, and you'll be able to work with that content. You'll be able to put that content in front of the manager or the head coach, and then it'll be a simpler conversation and a transition. The biggest thing for me is, I believe that when you're sitting there as an academy, it's so difficult to convert the staff into the way of thinking of the head coach rather than the other way around, because the head coach is the boss. And it's a fantastic, obviously, conversation to have. And there's loads more we could talk about.
Tony, you're obviously based up here. In normal times, you're out watching a lot of play. Are you convinced that there's the level of young players, in the Northeast is what it was, or is it better? Is it worse? How do you see it?
No, I think it's fantastic, the level of young players in the Northeast. I know, we're talking about Sunderland today, but, they lost quite a few young players to bigger clubs, to bigger academies, and maybe sold, some players that were already in the system that had potential. And obviously, for me, this is music to my ears, what Kristjaan's saying. I'm sort of thinking this could be great. If you're a young person playing in this area, which has always been a hotbed, and players are always returning back to the Northeast at some point in their careers, then why not? And if you get the coaching and the preparation of players and the pathway right, then that's all you can possibly do. The raw talent's definitely here.
So in terms of this manifesting out, Kristjaan, I guess you're not working, like you say, in terms of the flexibility that you've got. You're not going to put yourself under any sort of rigid time frames or anything like that. It's a lot about letting the process come through, which is pretty much what happened at Birmingham, to be fair, didn't it? It wasn't overnight, but at some point we've seen this sort of steady stream of young players that are coming into the first team at Blues.
No, I mean, I was very lucky at Birmingham. There was zero expectation on anyone producing any players. So from that perspective, with all due respect, Birmingham had a history of producing some players, but I wouldn't say it was a rich history of producing players. And if I'm honest, as we were entering the each will piece sort of domain at like 2011, everyone pretty much would say to us, "Oh, you're never going to do it because you didn't have your pitch fencing, you didn't have this, you didn't have that." But I'm the sort of person, that big challenge is the sort of challenge I liked, because we managed to build a team of people that were completely like-minded, aligned with what our purpose was. Yeah. And we were able to deliver on it when everybody said you couldn't. And I see similarities in that with where we're at Sunderland, because like you said, it's a well-documented period of time where it's not worked the way that everyone wants it to work, whether on or off the pitch. And therefore there's a huge challenge there. So that's the sort of thing that gets me out of bed in the morning. And you want to work with like-minded people, and we're starting to build a really, really good team here. Got a really, really, really good executive team, starting to build a really good management team up with people that are aligned to obviously what we're trying to do and get everyone thinking. We'll have we've got a club meeting this afternoon. We've got all 100 and whatever employees on Zoom for a club meeting, starting to pull everybody together to understand what's going on across the business, because for me, heading up the football side of the business, I need to know what the business side's doing, and vice versa. Yeah. We'll have Leon this afternoon as part of that discussion, talking about what he's doing with the first team to everybody across the club. So if we can sell more hospitality because they understand what they're selling, that money comes back into the football club. Then that's how the whole wheel will start turning a bit quicker.
Yeah. Kristjaan, I'd like to sort of, from an agent's point of view, and we've got quite a few agents on the call as well. And obviously, since the takeover was ratified, the results have been fantastic. Sunderland are in the playoff places. They're unbeaten in the last, 6, 7 games or whatever. When you're looking ahead to the summer transfer window, and obviously you've got the new ownership, there may be some money, there may not be some money. You obviously want a pathway and keep that pathway for your young players. How are you seeing this summer transfer window?
Well, first of all, we're in a really difficult position for 2 reasons. One is we don't have any recruitment staff, so there's your first one. Right. And the second one is we don't know which league we're going to be in. So you've got that's balanced. So at the minute we've built out a structure and a framework for what League One looks like and what the Championship looks like. We're just going through a process of building a recruitment team behind the scenes. Obviously, we've got some analysis and some data jobs out there that we're recruiting for at the minute to underpin that. But I don't want to disappoint all our agent friends that are on the call today. But whilst we've got an owner who obviously is financially viable, that we won't be going down a win at all costs, spend at all costs strategy. It just won't be that. If you look at our January transfer window, our net committed cost went up very, very fractionally in terms of the type of business we did. So it will all be part of the plan, and it's not going to be a project where it's going to be highly resourced on players. It's going to be about building all the behind the scenes elements.
And just let me get in there before you come in, Guy. And what about, you obviously you need to recruit some recruitment staff and scouts and what have you. And the GBE stuff, the fact that it's much more difficult to get any foreign players, is that potentially going to help you in some sort of way? Because you can just really focus your scouting on the UK, maybe Ireland, things like that. What's your thoughts on that?
No, we won't focus on the UK. We'll use a data and evidence-led approach to make sure that we've canvassed all areas of the globe to try to find the best talent for Sunderland. That's where we'll be at.
Wow.
I think in League One, with all due respect to all the rest of the teams, if we have a meeting with a player and a representative about coming to Sunderland versus some of the other clubs, I'd like to think we're in the box seat. I think that's the status that the benefit that we have. And then the flip side of that is, as a Championship club, our whole revenue to cost matrix completely shifts, because we'll have hopefully 40,000 people in the stadium, which again is something that not a lot of other championship clubs have. So all of a sudden our break-even line moves quite considerably in the championship, and we therefore can have a salary structure for the first team, which should be very, very competitive. So we're quite fortunate, I think, in terms of which avenues we go down. The issue that we have is the timeline between knowing sort of where you're going to be, and also our squad has a high number of players that are out of contract in the summer.
Yeah.
Therefore, there are a lot more decisions to make.
Good stuff. I want to come back to you on salaries, but Guy, I'm just going to let you come in and ask the question you wanted to ask.
No, it was more so of just stating out that a lot of the mistakes have already been made. So you can see the pathways that have been created by overspending.
Yeah.
You know, some of the stuff that we've watched on Netflix and the previous past of knowing the football club is that if you do it this way, it don't work, which is evident. If you do it that way and overspend with agents and foreigners, it doesn't work. They've got to want to come to Sunderland Football Club. And inevitably, it doesn't build a culture just by spend. It has to build a culture by warranting the lads that the types you need, and that obviously the discussions have to happen. And I think the pandemic's probably brought recruitment back to the bare basics of getting people to buy into ideas again, where you actually have conversations with people beforehand. You not have to go through 6 or 7 people like it has been in the past. You can actually sit down with the player and have a coffee and go, does he want to play for the football club? And he turns up in ripped jeans and earrings and caps on, and you think, I ain't too sure about this kid.
What's wrong with ripped jeans, Guy? I mean,
You wearing it? Is anyone wearing it?
I better put them ripped jeans away.
Yeah, put them away. Kristjaan, I just want to come back to you. In previous webinars, I've gone off on rants about the salary cap and how it was a real distortion to our entire society and makeup. So I'm really happy that has been removed. Obviously, from a revenue perspective, it was really distorted for Sunderland. But my question to you is, do you think that things will kind of get back to normal, or do you think that we will see a bit of a lag and actually now people will use what's happened this year in respect to the salary caps to lower future salaries versus what was happening before?
I think certainly people are going to use it as an opportunity to use it as a negotiating tool to say, look, we can't do this, we can't do that because of X, Y, and Z. I think you always see with these types of things a cycle approach whereby things will impact the cycle and then the whole thing will go again. So I think this is a small little blip, I think, in what will be, if you look back over a 10 or 15-year period. I mean, I don't mind the salary cap concept. I think the manner in which it was implemented and the timeline it was implemented, it wasn't really thought through enough. It wasn't really something I spent a lot of time looking at prior to coming to Sunderland because we didn't have it in the Championship. Of course. But I can also see the need to have something which manages the clubs to protect the entities and them as community, interests, if you like. But I think, look, it's got to be something which is sensible and fair to each individual case. I mean, how a club like Sunderland can be limited with its with the salaries it pays to a squad of players based on the revenue that we could generate, that's completely contradictory to what the ethos and the hypothesis was in the first place. I don't get it, and I think it's just generally creates a more level playing field, which I think there'll be future conversations. There's going to be different entities that are going to look to try to pursue that and push that type of situation. I think we've got to try and come up with something which affects the whole game in this country. I think going from a £2.5 million cap in League One to what was discussed as an £18 million cap in League in the Championship. How you can have like a nearly a 15-16 million pound difference between the leagues. And I think what it would have done as well is it would have completely created inequalities in the leagues, because our problem next year would have been as Sunderland is the 3 teams coming out of the Championship could have had a lot of additional, you'd have signed up all your players along the contracts, loads more they wouldn't have actually been operating under a salary cap. Exactly. So therefore you're going to have, that it's going to be, it would have been a bigger issue than the parachute payment, in my opinion. And the very fact that, I think on day 19 of the transfer window, we got communication from the EFL to say like some of the rules were changing and some of the interpretation, it just wasn't really fit for purpose for everyone to be able to deliver on it. And I think it's definitely a topic to discuss in the future, but I think it needs some real careful consideration.
Yeah, absolutely. You've put it far more politically than what I've done there, Kristjaan. So well
I
done.
needed to, because when you went off and said it's affected the whole of society, I thought I needed to just bring you back to
Yeah, you're probably quite impassioned about it. Kristjaan, absolutely brilliant. We've got loads of questions. I know you're going to come off, but then come back on for the questions at the end at about 20 to 12. But absolutely brilliant there. Thank you very much. So we look forward to it, and I'll get through some of those questions with Kristjaan a little bit later on. Tony, I'm going to leave it to you to introduce the next guys whilst I set up the slides, because it's a bit of a sort of issue that you've taken to heart a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I watched a webinar around held by Mission 89, and it was about it was child trafficking more than anything, and it was about people who bring sports people into different countries, and they get trafficked into those countries under the guise of offering a football trial or a sporting event, and actually get landed in those countries, and people losing a lot of money. So we've got Daniele Canepa from Mission 89 to tell us a little bit more about it. And we've got hiya Daniele, and we've got also a free webinar coming up in a couple of a week on Tuesday, that's going to really go into a bit more depth. But Daniele, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you, Tony. Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. So first of all, thank you, Football Transfer Forum, for the invitation. So yes, my name is Daniele Canepa, and it's not very easy to pronounce even for Italian speakers.
It's very easy for me. It's very easy for me to pronounce.
Okay, the people normally in Italy get the stress wrong, but anyway, so I'm based in Genoa, which is in northern Italy. You might know it for footballing reasons related to Genoa Cricket and Football Club and Sampdoria. And even though I'm in Italy, I can tell you the weather is not good today. So in case you were going to ask, I'll say it. So
yeah, good stuff. So we're really keen just to hear about what Mission 89 is all about, what you guys are up to, and as Tony has alluded to, we're going to have a deeper chat in a couple of weeks. So I'll leave it to you to explain what you guys are all about.
Thank you. Well, first of all, personally, I'm a freelance writer and education specialist, and I'm here today, yes, to represent this international NGO called Mission 89. It's relatively young as an organization. It was established 2.5 years ago. And for Mission 89, my role is a campaign speaker. So I'm going to tell you about these raising awareness campaigns we do. And I'm going to give you an anticipation of the webinar we're going to have on March 16th. So first of all, I'll tell you about the reason why we're called Mission 89. The name comes from the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, and which sets out the political, economic, health and cultural rights of children. And by children, it's meant people who are under 18. And it's an international treaty, this Convention on the Rights of the Child, that was signed in 1989. And that's where the 89 of Mission 89 comes from. Now, our legal address is in Switzerland, but we have an international team with people collaborating and living in different countries, even different continents. And our purpose, our mission, is to carry out research, promote education, and raise awareness about the issue of human trafficking, in particular child trafficking in and around sports, and in particular in and around football. Now, this phrase, human trafficking in and around football, is one of the key concepts that we're going to explore if you join us on the webinar of March the 16th. I say we're going to explore it because it's going to be me, and there's going to be a co-speaker, Dr. May Ikiora. And the title of the webinar, the title of this, awareness raising campaign we have is Not in Our Game. And by our game, obviously, we mean football. Because we normally think about human trafficking with regard to forced labor, illegal trafficking of organs, prostitution, but we very rarely or never think that this problem might also affect football, don't we? So it's a rather neglected issue. And that's why our first goal is to talk about this issue, to raise awareness about this issue. So I myself, as a volunteer, have been involved in several campaigns, not in our game campaigns, for example, in local schools, okay, because it's an issue that affects football, and obviously in Italy, especially young students, they want to know, they even want to know about the darker sides of the game. But I've also spoken, for example, 2 weeks ago, I and Dr. May Chiora spoke to the Human Trafficking Task Force of District of Columbia through a webinar, or Tony attended an event we have with the Alliance of Social Workers in Sports in November. So even though it's a rather neglected issue, human trafficking in and around football, which you might find on the internet as under the name of football trafficking, is a widespread phenomenon at international level. Now, here comes some questions. So, for example, how widespread? What do we mean by this word? What are the numbers? And we definitely are talking about thousands of people, but we can't have a precise figure at the moment for many different reasons. We know the issue is there and it's big, so we're talking in terms of thousands. But my colleague, Dr. May Chiora, and I are going to explore the reasons why we can't have exact figures. We'll be telling you about that if you come on the 16th. And also, what are the most important football trafficking routes? By routes, I mean which countries of origin, which countries of destination. That's another thing we'll be exploring. Also, probably we'll be mentioning about how long this has been going on. So some historical background, football history background for that. And also we're going to mention the regulations that have been put in place, for example, by FIFA to try and curb this trend. And so these are the very apparent, let's say, superficial, and by that I don't mean shallow. I mean that the first ones that we see, the first reasons underlying football, the first consequences of football trafficking that we see. But as long as economic reasons, we also believe that football trafficking finds a very fertile ground in two very common metaphors that we use when we talk and think about sports. By metaphor, I mean talking about a concept using words that we normally use for other concepts. And the two metaphors are, one is, we called it commodification, because we tend to talk about footballers in terms of commodities and goods. So, every day we talk about selling, buying, loaning. These are words that we use on a daily basis when we talk about the football market.
Transferring, Daniele, as well.
Transferring, yeah, exactly. And the other one is the automation metaphor. We tend to consider athletes and footballers as machines that get broken, that need repairing, need fixing. If you try and Google Cristiano Ronaldo, the perfect machine, you'll be surprised to see how many thousands of occurrences you get, really thousands. And obviously this is nobody's fault. I mean, we've just grown up taking these two metaphors for granted. Footballers are commodities, footballers are machines. So I'm not here to say that we must change the English dictionary. Sorry, can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, there was a technical glitch. So, so I'm not here to say that we need to change the English or the Spanish or the Italian vocabulary, because even in Italian or in Spanish, we use the same buy, sell, but obviously the way we speak and think can contribute to creating certain contexts and even problems. And we're going to talk about that. It's a very thorny, complex issue. It needs a systemic approach. So we do what we do as Mission 89, not because we think we can solve the problem. We're not Mr. Wolf from the Pulp Fiction film. but because we believe that by raising awareness, that's really the first step if we really want to try and tackle this issue.
Okay, I mean, it sounds absolutely fantastic. I really enjoyed our chat the other day. I found it really interesting. I won't give it away in terms of where the sort of, you know, the hotbed, the centerpiece of some of the issues are much closer to home than perhaps a lot of us feel. And I do feel, Tony, that, you know, in this country, it's an issue that we're naive on. We've seen some stuff on the telly in the few years about stuff that's gone on in Belgium. But actually, I think it's a really interesting topic, thing that we need to take some leadership on ourselves here as well. So I know Tony's put the link to the Eventbrite page in the chat. So I would really recommend that everybody comes on to that. We've got some great take up in recent weeks.
Yeah, Daniele, we've already had people signing up. I've just checked.
Brilliant.
We've already had a few sign-ups from the audience today, and I think it's going to be a great webinar. I'm really looking forward to it. So thank you for coming on today.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Yeah, Daniele, stay on, and obviously there might be some questions at the end.
Sure.
So, but thanks for your contribution.
Thank you very much.
Brilliant. And we're now ready to bring in our final guest of this month's football webinar, which is Michael Caulfield, sports psychologist. Michael, good morning again.
Good morning again.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, and fascinating to listen to Daniele there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I feel like it's one of those, us being stuck out on the west of Europe and being an island. It's something we've had our head in the sand on, Tony.
I think it was quite a good segue into you, Michael, because, you know, Daniele was talking about machines, the players being just referred to as machines, and I think that's an interesting concept, isn't it?
Well, I just wrote down, as Daniele spoke there, that the line I have floating in my head every day is from a conference I attended live. Remember those days years ago in New York, which is miles away from Middlesbrough, Sunderland, and Leeds, I can assure you, as we know. And it was a lady from a dance school, Juilliard School of Art and Dance, and she was on the stage with, because I was facilitating it, and she was on the stage with people from the NBA, the NFL, and they're all general managers, the sporting directors of the big leagues in American sport. And she looked up and down the line as they basically showed off about their budgets and the size of their business and the brand. And she then turned to them and said, "Gentlemen, please never forget, these are living, breathing, emotional human beings, not performance tools." And it killed the room. It stopped the room. And she was right, of course. Footballers are not performance tools. They're living, breathing, emotional human beings. And that's what I try to have at the forefront of my mind every time I go to work or work in football.
Brilliant. Before we get into it, let's take the opportunity just to hear a little bit about your background, because you've been involved in sport, you know, pretty much all of your life, and then transitioned into the work that you do now. So could you give us a sort of brief background for the guys listening in about about your career, really?
I'll try and keep it very brief, because I left school without any qualifications. I came to live here in a place called Lambourne near Swindon, to ride horses, race horses of all things, to try and make a living that way, which I didn't do. I then became chief executive of the Professional Jockeys Association, which is the same as the PFA, but without the salary, the paintings, the offices, and all that goes with it.
The marble,
So nice dig. That's good. Yeah.
No, and I haven't applied for the job, so I haven't ruled out my chances.
Well, the jobs up. Hopefully, the PFA will be changing. I think I'm hoping for some change anyway.
Well, I'll move away from that just for the moment. So I did that for 15 years, and I realised that the welfare, that the human side of jockeys they get hurt, they don't get paid very much, and they end up in hospital a lot. So I brought in the welfare side. And it was a well-known jockey. He was a young man at the time called A.P. McCoy. And he said to me one day, he'd been to see 3 sports psychologists about his controlling his disappointment, his temper, his anger. He was 24 at the time. And he came back one day, not far from where I'm speaking to you this morning. He said, "I'd pay to see you if you're a psychologist, because I got on well with him." And I said, "Why do you say that?" He said, "Because you understand my madness." So 5 years later, after years of retraining, spending tens of thousands of pounds on courses and degrees, I became a sports psychologist. With my ambition was to work in professional. That was always my ambition as a young boy. I remember a school teacher telling me, "You'll never make it in football," because I didn't play it very well. I didn't go to a school which really liked football. And when I started working in football, I took the pleasure in writing to them to say I'm working in football. So good luck to you.
Yeah,
And I've done 15 years of football now, and I
Michael,
love it to this day.
Michael, you're no different to me of that sort of dig into your colleagues, either past or present. So I think we're cut from the same cloth there.
Maybe, but I've had 50, and I'd had, lucky my first job was at Middlesbrough Football Club for 3.5 years, at Hull City under, Middlesbrough was under Gareth Southgate when he was a rookie manager, and some great coaches there like Steve Harrison, Malcolm Crosby. Then on to Hull City, where Steve Agnew kindly recruited me to work with Steve Bruce for 3 years, and Mick Phelan after Steve Bruce left. And now I've been at Brentford for the best part of 4 seasons. So fantastic. 3 different sides, 3 different clubs. And I regard it every day of working football. Literally, I wouldn't take my Christmas tree down because I find it a fabulous industry to work in. Not faultless, but a fabulous industry to work in. Brilliant.
That's great stuff. Right. So let's get into it. I know when we had the prep talk, I was talking about how in football, in terms of ownership and the leadership of the game, we talk about fit and proper. But what we need is fit and happy players as well, and that's the phrase that you use. What does fit and happy players actually mean? How does it manifest itself?
Well, physically fit and mentally fit, but especially as the world of football has opened up considerably, they've got to be settled and they've got to be content and they've got to feel wanted. And the line I used with you when I met you last week, Ryan, for the first time is, I think sometimes we recruit players or find players. They turn up at your football club from somewhere. We sometimes literally straight from the airport. They're living in a hotel, especially at the moment. And then at 3 o'clock on a Saturday or 7:30 on a Tuesday, after a week's training, we say, go and be brilliant. Thanks a lot. Go and be brilliant. So if I took you now, Ryan, to live in, say, Turkey or Sweden after a week, and I say, go on, Ryan, be brilliant after a week, I'd say good luck with that. And I think sometimes we forget that they've traveled, they've come from extraordinary backgrounds, often very backgrounds in hardship. And then we say, go on, be brilliant then, within a week, within 5 days even. And I just don't think it works like that. So my time is spent trying to understand the players, their backgrounds. I spend an awful lot of time talking, asking questions, which, believe it or not, in football, sometimes you just don't get the time to ask because the football week, even with wretched COVID, is pretty standard, Monday through till Saturday. It's pretty standard. And sometimes you simply don't get enough time to get to know the players deeply enough. And that's one of my roles, is to get to know the players deeply enough. And I'll say this quite openly on here also, to get to know the staff as well, because they feel the tension and the anxiety and the pressures of football just as much as the players, if not more so.
And is it really just about sort of exhaling how people are feeling and just literally getting things off their chest to sort of reveal some of the more sort of nuanced issues? And how do you see the relationship between I know it's the walks that you go on, isn't it? I think that's your method, isn't it? Really.
I had a desk once at Middlesbrough, and that was the worst mistake I made in my life, was having a desk, because you may as well have a wall, a barbed wire fence, or broken glass in front of you. It's hopeless. It's a desk. It's hopeless. Yeah. So no, I would think 90% of my conversations in football take place outside, even if it's freezing, wet, cold, miserable, and foggy. I think players are comfortable outside, as are staff, and so am I. And even before COVID, I was saying we should do more stuff outside, and that sadly came true as well. But no, I try and keep it natural. I keep it normal. I had an old dog, and he always gets to mention old Shankly, my old dog. You can tell where he came from, can't you? And sadly, he passed away last week, and I got more messages from footballers, coaches, managers, physiotherapists, doctors, S&C coaches, analysts going, can't believe it, Shankly's gone, because from all sorts of clubs, they'd come down, or I'd gone to them, and we just head off for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and that's where I got to know how the players thought, and they would speak to me, and it was just a very open, easy conversation to have.
Some of these things you don't really twig until somebody puts it right in front of you. And Guy, I'd be interested to see what you think. So I imagine that through the roles that you've had and the clubs that you've been involved with, there is a big emphasis on this part of the game. But I do really think that Michael's onto something there about the natural environment for a footballer is outside. Sitting in an office with a psychologist, it's not the environment to breed trust and emotion, is it?
No, I've gone down the path of seeing them myself and being an ex-player and trying to be understood being misunderstood, in my opinion, a few times, or more than a few times, if I'm honest. And having the conversations with sports psychologists, but also people who work closely to the football club. And I've always felt that when you're with a person who doesn't know you, being in a confined space can be a scary opportunity to get to know you, an intrusive space. So it was something that you know, I wanted to make sure that I did, and try and understand my own background and my own past and my own career, and why it was going wrong in certain instances and why it was going right. And I ended up doing the sports psychology diploma and reading up about it myself. But I found it very difficult to put myself across to people who I didn't know because of the trust issues I had as a kid. So there was loads of bits like that that I think so important, that space and sporadic awareness and you know, spatial awareness and things like that as players is so important, that they will feel more comfortable outside, especially with somebody who's got a pedigree of helping and a pedigree of I suppose, working with the top.
Yeah.
Right, I can also say that, just to pick up what and what Guy said there about the key word there was trust. Somehow, and it's hard in football because it's a fairly mistrusting industry at the best of times. They've got to learn, if they want to, and I don't force them, believe you me, to trust in me as a person. So just for the purposes of this forum this morning, I for example, when I go in once a week to a football club. I might go in twice if I'm asked, but twice would be the maximum. I don't wear training kit. I don't wear the club crest. I rarely watch training because I'm not a qualified football coach. So why should I suddenly start standing on the side of the pitch, looking as if, you know, my arms folded, looking serious, or going squeeze or make the pitch wider? I don't do that. I do literally. The staff at Brentford say you just float around a lot, and I do. I float around a lot, and that could be from the kit room through to the treatment room, through to the gym, through to the canteen when it was open, through to the director of recruitment's office. I try to get to know everyone at the football club because they are the experts. They give me all the clues, and they might say to a player, "Go and have a chat with Michael. He's actually a good fellow. He's not what you might think." And they can do so much of the work for me just by literally saying, "He's a good person. Go and speak to him," and it opens up so many conversations. And that's what I try and do, is to get players and staff talking, because football, if I may say this, is notoriously not been great at talking, because there's trust issues, and there's that great line, "Don't show them that you're weak."
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's just beyond nonsense. It's just rubbish.
Michael,
Rubbish.
if I can ask you, I mean, I think in terms of players' careers, as there's a series of critical moments, isn't there? You know, you can leave home and join the football club. You can sign your first contract. You can move house. You can make your first debut. You can have a big injury. All them critical moments are really key times for football. How do you help players, you know, who are struggling after or before them moments?
I think, again, I'll go back to trust and getting to know them. And they have all, if you just tell players what to do, you disable them, because they love, I think footballers are remarkable people, because football is the greatest meritocracy in the world. It is. There's nothing which comes close to football being the greatest meritocracy in the world, because no one, no matter how many islands you own, how many airlines you own, you can't buy a game of football. You've got to earn it on merit. And if they're going through what could be their debut, their first transfer, their first move, their first injury, their first rejection, these are pretty big moments in a young player's life. And I'm listening to Guy talk there now. Guy's not an old man now, so heaven knows how young he was when he was going through those issues as a footballer. They're often late teenagers, early 20s. And so they haven't even matured by that age. Their brain hasn't matured by that age.
Right.
So if you can understand what they're going through, contextualize it, and help them through it. And I suspect there's a couple of players at the moment who I'm helping through really difficult moments of their career via injury or form or whatever it might be, and not quite understanding what's happening to them, because one of them could be 19 or 20. And if you can remember when you were 19 or 20, did you have all the answers? No, absolutely not. Why should you at 19 or 20? So if you can be that, almost that different voice where you can help them through that moment, that's what I'm doing in my job, with staff as well, not just players.
Yeah, I didn't have the questions, never mind the answers at 19 to 20. Guy, you had a question?
No, just hitting the nail on the head. That's what I try and bring into my loans management, is the empathy of the player. I can't help but want to help them because of what I didn't get as a player when I was out on loan. And that's something that I think the lads believe in me as well. And the fact that you bounce around with, you know, in the ground with your normal clothes on and a relaxed environment for yourself puts a relaxed mental state on the guys. And I try and do that as much as talking to them as much as possible. But going back to the point, I can't remember a manager actually pulling me in at any point in my career and actually asking anything to do with my well-being. And that's the scary thing, you know. And that's I had this conversation with a lot of people.
I think that has changed, Guy. Is changing.
No.
And we're very lucky that someone like
110%. It's
at the top of the tree. Yeah.
Modern day's gone amazing. Modern day's gone amazing. The last 5 or 6 years is dramatically turned around. You know, I've got a great example at my club of Brendan Rodgers talking to players on a daily basis. But I'm saying in my career. So to then bring that forward and see that and go, right, that can't happen in my watch, same as your watch. It now needs to change, and there's a massive shift in mental health awareness and things like that anyway. So fantastic the stuff you're doing, and look at the work you're doing anyway, the clubs you've been at and where they've gone. So congratulations.
And I'm, Guy, if I can say here without pleading, I'm the outsider in football. I know how hard it is for me to, and my role, but particularly me, look at the state of me, to get accepted into football, and because and to gain the trust of managers, coaches, and players. Because all I'm trying to do is help the person, help the team, and help the club get better and overcome. I think the hardest thing to do, I was told this by Gareth Southgate, is still to cross that white line and be brilliant on Saturday afternoon or Tuesday evening, the rest of it. And I was intrigued by Nagelsmann last week at RB Leipzig, in an interview. He actually said, he's 33, by the way, he's 33 years of age. And he said, 30% of my job is about tactics and the team, 70% of it is about relationships and people. And that's just about in anything. And I think football is now picking up on that. And if you look at Nagelsmann, you look at Southgate, Jurgen Klopp, I mean, their work is based on empathy as much as tactics and technique.
Yeah, Michael, from an agent's point of view, or somebody who's like Guy in a club and working with these young players, and something happens, what is there any sort of tips and guidance that you can give? What is there some signs to look out for, and what should be your first thought or your first intervention as from a club or an agent's point of view?
Good question. I would say from an agent's point of view is, I think sometimes a young player is very wary still of psychology, psychologists, mental well-being, call it whatever tag you want to put in it. I think that stigma and that barrier is being chipped away at every single day. And if you ask a footballer how they're doing, which is, they often go, yeah, fine, thanks. If you ask them twice, their stock reaction is, yeah, grand, fine, brilliant. Yeah, brilliant, strong, never felt better. And then you ask them 5 minutes later, they might say, to be honest with you, and they start talking. And then if I can give you one recent example, I waited 6 months. I remember waiting almost 6 months for a player to say, Mike, have you got a minute? Now, I wanted to go there 6 months earlier. I was desperate to go there 6 months earlier because I could tell that something was bothering him, something was upsetting him. There was something not right about his whole demeanor in the football club. And eventually, actually, it took a red card, and so he missed 3 weeks. And eventually I said, when the team were out there preparing for the game, I said, how are you getting on? He went, yeah, fine, thanks, great. I said, are you a bit fed up, or words to that effect, missing tomorrow? I'm a bit. I said, what happened? They talked me through it. And he went, and that led me into clues about a couple of things about some anger and some temper issues. And I said, well, that's not great, is it? Because you're missing 3 weeks of it now. And I said, come on, let's go get the dog out the back of the car. He went, you what? I said, come on, I've got the dog on the back. I said, we'll walk around the pitches and we'll go off down the road or whatever. And off we went with my dog, and we came back. Now, this sounds like a happy story, and guess what? It's a happy story, so please bear with me. a while later, a period of time later, this young man got picked for his first representative squad for England. And off he went to St. George's Park. And the bit I love about football more than anything, despite the so-called wealth and the glamour, they always turn up for their first international cap with a black bin liner. Off they go with the black bin liner from the kit manager after the game on Saturday. So he turns up at St. George's Park with his black bin liner and boots and shin pads. And the next morning at breakfast, the manager, of the England manager, Gareth Southgate, was there, who I know well from my time at Middlesbrough. And he's not embarrassed to say he's been on a few dog walks over the years when I was at Middlesbrough as well. And the players, he goes, morning, how are you going? Yeah, strong, fine, great. How are you getting on? Yeah, never better. Strong, fine, great. You just got this stock answer in case you showed a weakness. And eventually the manager turned to him and said, have you been on your walks with Mike and Shankly yet? And he went, I have, yeah. I love those chats, and so do all the lads. And that was it. That's when I knew that that players are beginning to talk and just learn about themselves, because he was 20 and he was only just beginning to learn about himself. And now I'm pleased to say he's moved to another club. He's in the Premier League and he's flying, absolutely flying. But I think he's learned to find out about himself, what made him tick, and also what made him do silly things on and off the pitch.
And
if you
Michael,
can do that,
maybe that red card was the best thing that happened to him at that particular time, even though it didn't feel like that when he got shown it. You know what I mean?
But it gave me a chance to get to know him. But I waited.
Absolutely.
And I use the animal kingdom as an example. I don't go chasing players, because if you put yourself upon them, they'll run away. Like, you try and catch a wild animal, it'll run away. If you wait there, eventually it'll inquire to find out A, have you got food, and B, what are you up to? And we're just the same. Eventually I'll go, what is it you do then, Mike? And off you go. And then you can start talking.
Brilliant. Just as a sort of final question before we leave, and whilst you're answering this, I'll put the slide up with your details again, Michael. I know we spoke about in the prep meeting. What's your assessment in terms of where we're at with well-being, mental health, whatever, however you want to label it? I think from a personal perspective, you know, I really feel like we've opened a jar, and you know, if you haven't got some of these you know, problems going on, you're almost seen as like in the minority a little bit. You know, what's the balance really I'm getting? Because we want people to be robust, and guess what? It's okay if you haven't got a mental health issue as well.
We've got to be very careful, and you could say I work in the industry, if you like, but I'm super cautious about opening up a mental health debate every single day, because there's a huge difference between mental illness, mental health, depression, and feeling down and feeling low. So if I'm meeting a player or seeing a player who's out for 8 weeks, 12 weeks with an injury, and guys on there from Leicester, does James Justin feel absolutely brilliant at the moment, having torn his ACL? No, but we mustn't put everything, and I say this to all the mental health people I work with, you mustn't just say it's a mental health issue, because that opens up everything. And then people think, am I ill? And actually they're not, they're possibly just down. And then you've got to help them through that period rather than say it's a mental health issue. And if you speak to some of the footballers who have come out with generally mental health issues and mental illness, there's a big difference between that and having a rough time and having a disappointing time. There's a huge difference. And we mustn't just put everything down as a mental health issue, because otherwise I think it will run riot. But there are times when you've got to support a player through a traumatic time in their life.
Michael, absolutely brilliant, really fascinating. Obviously, so sorry to hear about the loss of.
Listen, he had a great. He did 37,000 miles, 15 years, and he had a great life and a great ending. So it's fine. But gosh, he did his bit for football, did Shankly, the dog and the person.
Absolutely. And I've shared the details, so please go and check out Michael's excellent website. There's a bit of Shankly on the website actually as well, isn't there, Michael?
Of course there is.
Of course there is. Sorry. Okay, right. Let's get into the questions. So I invite Daniele to come back on as well, because we've got lots of questions for everybody. And in fact, Daniele, the first question I'm going to take is for you, and it's from Matthew. I guess the question is really from an agent perspective, what are some of the sort of danger signs that people need to look out for about if they're being offered players or things of that nature, to whether or not, you know, what are the red markers to actually this player could have been trafficked?
I think we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about this 10-step scheme that gets repeated in football trafficking. So I think the first thing is to be aware of this type of process. So thank you, Matthew, for the question. I think if you want to know more, I think if you come to the long session, and then we'll talk about these 10 steps, so you can find, you know, at which stage the player might be, and also, you know, understand if there are signs of, warnings of trafficking.
Excellent. Kristjaan, question for you from Rick. And does the academy and the team have a player care department? And how important is this to the development of players? Oh, you're just on mute, Kristjaan.
Sorry about that.
Right.
We have a player care manager. We've got different members of staff that have responsibilities in player care as well. And that's one of the areas that we're currently reviewing, how that best works and facilitates the needs of the players from 8 all the way through to the first team. I think it's a really important part of a provision for players to try to underpin excellence. But obviously what we've got to try to ensure is that through the natural progression of other departments, they've also got strands of player care just within their own domains, if you like. So for us, it's just been able to map that out, that there's clarity. I think if it gets a little bit ambiguous for the players, especially, they tend not to use it. I think we've got to get some clarity around where they get the support, help and assistance, for what reason and where.
Yeah. And a follow-up question to that from David Lynch, who's I know is an agent up in the Northeast, actually representing 2 of the academy players at Sunderland. And David says he sees his role very much as a mentor to young players and can help them improve. Would you have ambitions to sort of lining up the club and the agents in terms of what is being mentoring, how it's working, so everybody's on the same page?
Yeah, certainly. I think for us, it's really, really important that the team surrounding the athlete understand what's going on.
Yeah.
I think the frustration sometimes that clubs have is that, representatives are advising players with alternative information to what the club are trying to push, and stand for. But therefore, if you don't include those representatives within the discussion, how do you expect them to understand what's going on?
Absolutely.
So, one of the things we did at previous employment was allow the reps, certainly with the older players, to come into the review meetings and be part of the review meetings and understand what was going on with the players.
Yeah.
Therefore, you're putting the pressure back on them to say that, well, if you're going to do that representation, mentoring piece really, really well, then you should be there to understand the full context of the situation, maybe not just the financial implications or the contractual element.
I think that's progressive. Yeah.
That's really interesting. That's never ever happened to me. I've never been part of any meeting with anybody that I've represented in their club to talk about player care, and I think that's joined up. I think that would join up the sort of circle, if you like.
No, I think that's really, really progressive. Question for you, Michael, specifically on helping players who are going through sort of homesickness. What would be, is the sort of overarching sort of ideas there, or is it really along the line of what we've just talked about in terms of being open, listening, gaining trust?
No, I think particularly the club I'm associated with at Brentford, we've got, as you know, an unbelievably diverse playing squad. I think last night, if I look at some of the team from Spain, Sweden, Denmark, Iran, France, they come from all parts of Europe and beyond. And we've also got a wonderful man at the club called Peter Gillam. You might have heard of Peter Gillam. I think he's up to the best part of 4,000 games and missed 3 games in 53 years. And Peter is in charge of the player care from that side of it. And so I think we try not to surround the player, but I know there's one young man at the moment who plays for us. He's living on his own. It's through COVID, in lockdown, and he's in his very, very early 20s, and he's from overseas. And really, I'm trying to help him, as we all are at the club, to make sure that he's okay, that he's still talking, he's communicative, he's eating, resting, and dare I say it, we've got a specialist there who's not there through COVID, of course, and a West who specialises in sleep and sleep patterns. Yep. Because if they're not sleeping well, good luck trying to get them to play well on a Saturday afternoon if they've had a week of absolutely hopeless sleep. And that affects their well-being more than anything if they're not resting right. So we do the basics, and I had written down on my brief notes for this morning, I think there are no secrets really in football, but if you get the basics right, and that includes relationships, if you get the basics right, then you've got a chance to produce a fit, healthy and content footballer. But if the basics aren't right, no matter how much money you throw at it and them, you've got no chance. So we start with the basics every single time. And that starts with a relationship and showing that you genuinely care for them and not just the result. The result matters, but so do they as people.
The stuff around sleep is absolutely fascinating. Guy, I'm presuming that you do some stuff on sleep at Leicester, whether it's with the first team or the senior teams.
Yeah, we've got guys that come in and speak to the players on a regular basis. Like you said, player care's gone through the roof in regards to the amount of information, but it's got to be the right information for the right lad to take it on board in the first place. So lads who have had issues in hotels with the obviously scenario of COVID, anxiety issues in regards to overthinking, and just constantly being in the room because obviously they can't get out. So there's lots of little things going on that the club can provide and help the lads with, and the lads have been, I'll be honest with you, the lads have been really successful this year with what's been going on. They've got good support mechanisms around them, including the family, and that should be the first port of call.
I don't think, just on this forum, I don't think you can overplay the importance of rest, recovery and sleep. So basically most teams are playing twice a week at the moment, which means a midweek game either home or away. So I think Brentford, well, we were at Norwich last night. That's a long drive. That team coach probably pulled in about 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. So that's a night of not sleep. And even a home game, all the research we do tells us that the average player gets to sleep about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And yet they're meant to recover 2 days later and be brilliant. Go on, be brilliant again 48 hours later. And so again, it's back to basics of making sure that the simple well-being strategies are in place day in, day out. And they understand that as well. And they buy into it.
I'd like to ask just a question, and it's to anyone really on this panel. What about the players who are released? What happens at your clubs about players who are going to see the manager of whichever team, or the senior, the sporting director, and then they get released? What happens then? Because that's been in the news quite a lot, hasn't it?
Okay, let's go to Kristjaan on that one. I think it's an important question, Kristjaan, because obviously in the last few weeks, a lot of the sort of 16s and 18s would have found out that their news. I'm actually involved in trying to put some of those players come into our academy, and sometimes the information, first of all, that's given to them about why they're released isn't great, not really technical enough in my eyes, and then really on Tony's point, in terms of the aftercare and the duty of care afterwards, what are your thoughts?
I think it's with a lot of things. It's the preparation stage is key to then the most important stage. So the first thing is having honest and robust conversations with the players leading up to the decision, that they know what their trajectory looks like, and what the level of conversation. So I would always like to feel that an under 16 coming in to speak to me as an academy manager should always roughly know where they're at. They pretty much know. The timing of the meetings is important, so I think, the Premier League and the EFL have done a lot to move that under 16 timeline back to the 31st of December to give kids more chance. We were always trying to make our decisions in November or, late November at the very latest on those types of ones. And then you've got to make sure that they become the focus of your energy for that period afterwards. And you've got the resources to be able to deploy to deliver on what they need, because you can't say you've got a people-centric environment or you're player-centered, and then as soon as they're not one of you or perceived to be one of your players going to be engaged in your squad. My opinion with that is that that's where you really find out the quality of the organisation. So if it's from a player's perspective, it's what's your exit like, and it's the same with staff, what's your exit like. So my phrase would be, you don't always give people great news, but you can do it in a great way. And I think that's where you really tell about how good your culture is and how those players get dealt with on the process that when they leave.
Ryan, can I add to that? And Kristjaan, good morning. I worked at one of the 3 northeastern clubs, Middlesbrough, back in 2006. And just to show that not everything we did then was failure. The academy manager then was, in my opinion, one of the best people I've met in sport in my entire life, not just football, and that was Dave Parnaby. And Dave Parnaby's track record at Middlesbrough will always stand up to the closest inspection. The way in which Dave did that with players and with parents, I would spend 3 mornings a week just sitting in Dave Parnaby's office. That was like doing a free degree 3 times a week with Dave Parnaby in player care, in player development, in also almost coaching the parents as well. And if you look at the list of players who've come through Dave Parnaby's and Middlesbrough's academy, just the way in which he was so open and honest with them and never misled them in any way at all as to where they stood in the football club, what their chances might be. And they don't all go on to be Premier League players. I think I look at one, Richie Smallwood. He's had a great career. It wasn't in the first team at Middlesbrough, but what a good career he's still having. And that was a result of Dave Parnaby's leadership of the academy then.
Excellent. Another question for you, Kristjaan. Dean asks, do you have any advice for people trying to work towards becoming a sporting director?
Any advice?
Yes, any advice to working towards becoming a sporting director?
I think the way that the role's going at the minute, I think the academy. I think you've obviously seen quite a few academy managers move into that position,
Yeah.
and I do think the academy manager position is such a an education, if you like. And I was really fortunate to get that role at Birmingham when I was quite young, and then obviously have a real good sort of almost sort of 8 or 9 years at it. Because I think what you have to do is you have to lead experts in a multidisciplinary approach. And I think that's, ultimately what your job is, just including one more team. That's the way I've always seen it. You're just adding one more team onto it. So I think if you can get an academy manager position and you can spend time refining your leadership skills, your organizational skills, your soft skills, your emotional intelligence, work out probably which area that you've got specific super strengths, which bits you probably need to know a bit more about. And then when you get into the sort of high leadership position, try to ensure that you recruit in the right areas and you've got people that can test you and keep you on your game. I think that's I don't know if there's another route that could prepare you better than being an academy manager. I mean, I suppose being a performance director in another sport would be very, very similar, and it'll be interesting maybe to see over the future whether anybody comes into our sort of fraternity from another sporting background. I know it's been tested a few times in the past, but I do think that is a good grounding.
And Kristjaan, what about the FA's sort of talent ID? It's quite a new sort of model, going 1 right through to 5, and I think the 5 is the technical director's course. Is that something? Have you done that, or is that something that you're on with? Or
yeah, I'm on level 5 now, but I do.
All right, okay.
My personal opinion is I think that's just it's a good case study on the crux of the problem. You're suggesting that the sporting director's position is a talent ID position.
Yeah.
So therefore, I'm not saying that a person from a talent ID background can't do the sporting director's job. I'm merely saying that I think to do the role in its purest form, should I say, for me, it's one of 6 domains I manage. Now, at certain points in the year, it becomes the most important domain, no doubt. But in other times of the year, it's no more important in other areas. So, I think that element, I think it needs to be taken out of talent ID, and maybe 2 or 3 of the modules are within talent ID. But
you sort of alluded to it, Kristjaan, with a certain time in the year. I take it you mean the transfer window sort of thing. Is like often sporting directors are getting judged on the signings. Are the players are the most expensive commodities that the football club has. And often a sporting director is judged on, oh, well, he signed that one and it's worked out. He signed that one, it didn't work out, and that's I think that's the view from the outside, but it's obviously a lot different to that.
Yeah, no, I'm peddling that, to be honest with you. If they're really good, it's me. If it's not good, it's somebody else. But look, we're in the process of building a recruitment team, and I don't think you can do that job on your own. I mean, it's a really collaborative project regarding the sporting director, the head coach, the recruitment team, and then ultimately the sign-off from the owner. Yeah. I'm really lucky in this position because I've got like some real autonomy to manage the football department. So, for example, when I got the job, it was, who do you want to pick as head coach? And that was my decision, if you like. Now, yeah, I did it in a collaborative style because that's my leadership style, if you like, to make sure we had engagement from all the different stakeholders. That was going to fit for Sunderland, especially being new.
Yeah.
So you can't have a position like this in a football club the stature and size of Sunderland and then shirk responsibility around that. So, but it's about building a team that can deliver on all those KPIs. And transfers are in the public eye, aren't they? Definitely. But the medical team is just as important. Now, just doesn't canvas as much back page press, but
absolutely. I think it's a great point, and I think it's something we as an industry really need to not fight against, but create the sensible narrative. Guys, we've come to the end. It always races away with us. I want to thank everybody that's joined us today as a panelist. Daniele, will be seeing you very, very shortly for the longer talk, and I know Tony will be sending out all the details as well. Michael, thank you for your time and insight. Kristjaan, absolutely tremendous. I want you to wish you good luck for the rest of the season. obviously you've got a final, the Papa John's Trophy final to look forward to. They've got to get a new sponsor, haven't they? I would prefer the salary cap final than trophy final. That's how much that sponsors wrong. But great to see Sunderland heading in such a great direction. And Guy, thank you for your time as always. Just before you go, I do want to share with everybody the next webinar that Tony and I are doing with our partners at the European Football Agents Association, which is doing business in France. Tony, there's a few decent players in France, isn't there? So it's well worth tuning in.
Well, to be honest, Ryan, I was absolutely blown away with the doing business in Brazil. Marcus Motta was just off the charts. You know, he was brilliant, wasn't he? I mean, we really enjoyed that doing business in Brazil, and the talent in Brazil. You know, we talk about footballers being around the world. Brazilians are everywhere, populating all different leagues, and it's pretty much the same thing for France. It's a massive hotbed of footballing talent. You know, it's the sort of first place Brentford look. You know, they're looking down in League Two and the producer, a Ben Rama or an Mbuemo or a Mopai or whatever. And so doing business in France, it's a guide for football agents, but it's also, you know, we're going to have a lawyer, a sporting director. It's worth clubs coming along to watch it as well. But just before we finish, Ryan, I just want to go to Guy, because our next actual webinar is on the 1st of April, and there won't be any gags or anything like that. But Guy, can you announce our special guest for that?
Yeah, I've been lucky enough to agree a deal with Les Parry, who's the Man United Pathway coach, and also basically the same job I do at Leicester City as the loans management. He's coming on and he's going to be speaking about Manchester United's loan management and their approach and their processes that are in place to look after the kids, prepare the kids, and obviously, hopefully secure successful loans for them. So he's coming on April the 1st. I had to double check with Tony on my first show, and we're going to go from there. But obviously, we're going to have the same guests that are going to obviously run the place. So thank you, Ryan, and thank you, Tony, for trusting me and getting Les on.
No, absolutely. Right, hope everybody has a good weekend. Thanks for tuning in again, and hopefully we'll see you all soon.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.